Now, as a fighter, Steve McQueen, now he is good in that department because that son of a gun got the toughness in him.
There are stars who burn bright and then disappear. And then there is Steve McQueen, a man who died over 4 decades ago, yet somehow keeps making money every single year. His name still moves merchandise. His face still sells watches. His cars still break auction records. And his family? They are still cashing checks from deals tied to a man none of them fully understood while he was alive. This is not a story about a Hollywood star who got lucky. This is a story about a man who, almost by instinct, built one of the most durable private fortunes in entertainment history. And it is a story about what happened to that fortune when he was gone, who got rich, who got cut out, and who is still fighting over the pieces. Steve McQueen was born on March 24, 1930, in Beech Grove, Indiana. His father, a stunt pilot, abandoned the family before McQueen could speak. His mother struggled with alcoholism and moved him between relatives in Missouri and Los Angeles throughout his childhood. By his early teens, he had ended up at Boys Republic, a reform school in Chino, California, a place he would later describe as the first time anyone had ever set a real boundary for him. He served in the United States Marine Corps and clashed repeatedly with authority, spending time in the brig on more than one occasion. But he completed his service, and when he came out, he drifted toward acting, not because he had a passion for the craft, but because he needed money, and the actor studio in New York was cheap to attend. What nobody expected was that the camera would fall in love with him. His early television work on Wanted, Dead or Alive gave him a following. His big-screen breakthrough came with The Magnificent Seven in 1960, but it was The Great Escape in 1963 that turned him into a global phenomenon. He did not even need dialogue. The film's most iconic sequence, his character attempting to jump a barbed wire fence on a motorcycle, became the image that defined him for an entire generation. The actual jump over the fence was performed by stunt double Bud Ekins for insurance reasons, but McQueen had considerable writing time throughout the film, and the sequence became permanently attached to his legend regardless. What separated McQueen from other stars of his era was not just talent, it was leverage. He understood, earlier than almost anyone in Hollywood, that his image was a commodity that could be negotiated around. He charged $750,000 up front for the Thomas Crown Affair in 1968, a staggering number for the time. He negotiated back-end profit participation deals that were practically unheard of for actors. His deal on the Towering Inferno earned him millions beyond his base salary. He also charged studios $50,000 just to read a script. If he passed, he kept the money. Studios paid it gladly because they knew McQueen's name on a poster was worth more than most other stars combined. At the height of his career in the mid-1970s, he was the highest-paid actor in the world, but the wealth he built on screen was only one layer of what he was quietly assembling. Off-camera, McQueen was buying machines. Lots of them. Over the years, he accumulated approximately 130 motorcycles, Triumphs, Husqvarnas, Indians, and rare British and German models. He bought and stored nearly 60 automobiles, including a 1963 Ferrari 250 GT Lusso, a Jaguar XKSS, a Porsche 917K, and the Highland Green 1968 Ford Mustang GT he drove in Bullet. He did not display these cars at parties or lend them out for publicity. He stored them in garages on remote properties, away from cameras and reporters. He had a partnership with Tag Heuer, then simply Heuer, that placed his wrist in one of their Monaco watches throughout the filming of Le Mans in 1970. That single moment of product placement would eventually be worth tens of millions to the brand. McQueen also held stakes in motorcycle marketing campaigns and had profit-sharing arrangements in several of his film contracts that continued generating royalties long after theatrical runs ended. Most of this activity was invisible to the press. McQueen preferred it that way. In 1978, McQueen was diagnosed with pleural mesothelioma, a cancer linked to asbestos exposure. Doctors believe the exposure came from the fireproof racing suits he wore for years and from insulation materials he encountered on film sets. The diagnosis was devastating, and McQueen chose not to publicize it immediately. In July 1980, he traveled to Mexico to pursue unconventional treatments, eventually going to a clinic in Juarez run by a practitioner whose only medical license, for orthodontics, had been revoked years earlier. The treatment involved Laetrile, a substance derived from apricot pits that had been banned in the United States. McQueen paid upward of $40,000 per month for these treatments. On November 7, 1980, he died following a surgical procedure in Juarez. He was 50 years old. The headlines that followed his death were mostly wrong. Most reporters concluded that McQueen had died nearly broke, that cancer treatments and legal bills had drained his wealth. In reality, his estate was structured in ways that made its true value nearly impossible to read from the outside. The official probate valuation came in at approximately $2 million in liquid and visible assets. What it did not capture were the vintage vehicles, the motorcycles, the watch collection, the image licensing rights, the royalty streams, and the physical items stored in locked barns and climate-controlled garages across California and New Mexico. His will, which had been prepared in early 1973, named his two children, Chad McQueen and Terry McQueen, as primary heirs. His third wife, Barbara Minty, whom he had married just months before his death and who had cared for him during his illness, received personal belongings, but no significant financial stake. His first wife, Neil Adams, the mother of his children, the woman who had guided much of his early career and introduced him to key figures in Hollywood, received nothing at all. She has spoken publicly about that exclusion multiple times in the decades since. For years after McQueen's death, his estate was considered modest by Hollywood standards. Then things started changing. In 2006, estate managers opened a barn on a remote New Mexico property that had not been touched since McQueen's death. Inside, they found dozens of motorcycles, stacks of original racing helmets, leather jackets, film scripts with handwritten notes, and race gear with his name still stitched inside. Experts who cataloged the collection estimated its total value at over $30 million. It had been sitting in the dark for a quarter of a century. Auction results confirmed the scale of what McQueen had quietly assembled. In January 2020, the original Highland Green 1968 Ford Mustang GT from Bullitt sold at Meekham's auction in Kissimmee, Florida for $3.74 million, setting a record as the most expensive Mustang ever sold at public auction. In December 2020, a Hoyer Monaco watch that McQueen had worn throughout the filming of Le Mans sold at Phillips for $2,208,000, a world record for any Hoyer watch at auction. His 1963 Ferrari 250 GT Lusso Berlinetta, sold in 2007, had fetched $2.3 million. A 1937 Crocker motorcycle from his collection sold in 2006 for $276,000. These were not isolated windfalls. They were the visible tip of a fortune that had been quietly compounding for decades. The bigger story was not the auctions. It was the licensing. By the late 1990s and into the 2000s, brands realized that McQueen's image carried a weight that most living celebrities could not match. He represented authenticity, a quality that is genuinely rare and nearly impossible to manufacture. Companies began approaching his estate for the right to use his name, his face, and his association with certain products. Tag Heuer built an entire campaign around the Monaco watch he wore in Le Mans, crediting the film with turning what had been a struggling model into one of the most recognized luxury timepieces in the world. Tag Heuer continues to pay licensing fees to McQueen's estate to this day. Barbour, the British outerwear company, used a photograph of McQueen wearing one of their jackets and turned it into one of the most profitable single-image marketing campaigns in fashion history. Ford revived the Bullitt Mustang as a special edition model multiple times, leaning on McQueen's connection as the primary selling point for collectors and enthusiasts. The estate was managed deliberately. Rather than licensing McQueen's image to every product that came calling, his representatives kept it selective. The scarcity created demand. When McQueen's name appeared on something, it meant something precisely because it did not appear on everything. By 2012, Forbes had listed Steve McQueen as one of the top-earning dead celebrities, with his estate bringing in approximately $6 million that year alone from licensing deals and auction activity. That figure has grown substantially since. Chad McQueen, Steve's only son, took control of the estate's licensing and branding operations after his father's death and held that position for decades. He approved product deals, pursued companies that used his father's name without authorization, and helped build the McQueen brand into the controlled commercial operation it became. He also founded McQueen Racing LLC, connecting his father's legacy to the motorsports world. Chad worked as an actor himself, perhaps best known for his role in The Karate Kid, and was a competitive driver who raced at events, including the Baja 1000 and the 24 hours of Daytona practice sessions. At the time of his own death in September 2024, at the age of 63, his net worth was widely estimated at around $45 million, a figure drawn from both his personal work and his decades of managing his father's estate. Terry McQueen, Steve's daughter, chose a quieter path, working in Hollywood as an executive at Universal Studios and largely avoiding the public battles over her father's legacy. She died in March 1998 at the age of 38, following complications from a liver transplant. With her passing, Chad gained full control of Steve McQueen's estate. Terry's share of the estate passed to her daughter, Molly McQueen, who became part of the second generation to benefit from the legacy. Molly works as an actress and producer and has been involved in consulting on estate licensing decisions, helping ensure that the McQueen brand remains consistent. Barbara Minty, though not a major heir under the original will, did not disappear from the McQueen story. She co-produced documentaries about Steve's life and authored a memoir that became a bestseller. Over time, she was included in some royalty-adjacent arrangements tied to the estate's public image efforts. Her position gave her a platform and, by extension, income, though her financial stake has always remained smaller than Chad's. Neil Adams, who received nothing, has nonetheless remained a significant voice in how McQueen's personal history is understood. She has spoken in numerous interviews and written about her role in his early career, her exclusion from his will, and the emotional toll of watching his legacy be monetized by others. She has not pursued legal action, but her story remains one of the most quietly complicated threads in the entire McQueen narrative. What McQueen left behind was not a typical Hollywood estate. It was a machine, one that did not require new performances, new interviews, or new content to keep generating revenue. His films were already made. His photographs already existed. His cars and bikes were already aging into museum pieces. His name was already embedded in the cultural understanding of what cool looks like. In April 2024, just months before Chad's death, the estate brokered a new round of licensing agreements that included partnerships with a shoe company, a watch designer, a motorcycle manufacturer, and a limited edition capsule collection tied to Le Mans. In 2024, Porsche released a tribute model connected to McQueen's legacy that sold out immediately among collectors. The total value of Steve McQueen's estate and ongoing licensing operation has been estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars, a figure that would have seemed absurd compared to the $2 million probate valuation from 1980. The barn in New Mexico, the watch on a mechanic's wrist, the green Mustang sitting in a family garage in Tennessee for 40 years. All of it turned out to be worth something. All of it turned out to be part of a fortune that its owner never fully explained to anyone. Steve McQueen was not quiet because he was hiding. He was quiet because he understood that in silence, things tend to grow. He was right about that. He is still right about it today. If you found this video interesting, like, share, and subscribe for more stories about the legacies that outlive the legends.